Good evening, everybody. I hope you are enjoying this edition of the IVDC. Today, I'll try to make it even more exciting with my talk on the design for free-to-play games. Now, free-to-play games are absolutely amazing. I will begin with just a few figures. Now, GameForge, leading provider, German provider of free-to-play games, 300,000 new players every day. How do they do that? They localize their game in 55 languages, including Swahili. So their coverage is absolutely incredible. MapleStory by Nexon, South Korean publisher, over 92 million players. Playfish, over 1 billion game sessions every month. And lastly, Kingdom of the Winds, lesser known MMO by Nexon again, has been played for over 12 years. Now, and those figures are about a year old. Now, this is amazing. My point is that free-to-play game, we are different from traditional games. We are in a different world. And that's also why I want to talk about design, because when you design games for those type of games, rules are different. So here's very quickly the outline of my presentation. First, I'm going to talk very briefly about the benefit of this business model, because when we talk about free-to-play games, we talk about the business model. We don't talk about a genre. As we'll see, there are different kinds of free-to-play games. Then, money talk. This is kind of important because we are here to make games and to make a living out of it. And I'll try to give you some figure on how much money it's possible to make with free-to-play games. I will also briefly describe the profiles of the player. That's important to keep in mind because, as you know, we don't do games for ourselves. We do games for people out there who buy our games and play with them. And then I will go into the thick of my presentation, which is, actual design of free-to-play games. And then, if I still have some breath left, I will just cover a few trends. I will also introduce myself. So I'm Pascal Luban. I'm a freelance creative director and game designer. I've been doing that for about 15 years. So here are just a few titles on which I've been working. I've essentially worked on console games, but also, mobile phone games, handheld, flash, and so on. I've also worked, obviously, for free-to-play games. I work for This Slide, the French company who is publishing Treasure Madness, which is a pretty interesting free-to-play games. That had been copied by, I think it's Zynga. They stole the idea, which is pretty common in this industry. I also work for Metaboli. I did some game design audits of free-to-play games which were about to be published. And also, it's a more ambitious project. I work for Rocking Pixel. I did the game design and level design concept for a free-to-play shooter. Unfortunately, the company ran out of money, so this thing didn't go beyond the concept. But if you guys have 10 million euros in your pocket, we can talk. So, okay, that's going pretty fast. Okay, first, I would like to go a little bit more into the definition of what free-to-play games are. So essentially, I see four categories. This is my own way of categorizing them, okay? First, maybe the one that we know most about it are what I call the massively social online games. Examples are Pet Society, Farmville, those kind of games. Now, those games are completely different from what you were used to because the player objectives in those games is very different from what we're used to. Traditional games, there's always an objective of winning, of going up of beating your own score, of going at the leaderboard. In massively social games, no. The main objective of those games are to be support for interpersonal relationship. Yes, who has the biggest brain also? It's an interesting example. I will come back later on to this one. Then, again, to go more into detail, why are those games different? Is that one of the reasons is that they are fueled by different emotions. Those are some of the emotions that can be generated by those games. Pride, envy, sharing, friendship, love. Usually you don't see those things, those values in traditional games. But massively social games, they rely on that. Why? Because you play with your friends. You play with your real friends. This is very different. When you play multiplayer, on XBLA, on Xbox Live or PSN or PC, play against lots of people, but most of the people you play with or against are people you just don't know. You just meet them in the lobby. So sometimes you play with your real friends, but most of the time you play against strangers. Massively social games, it is different. You play with your real friends. Why? Because the best examples are Facebook games. You play with your own friends. So that means that you're going to behave in a totally different way because those people are your real friends that you know, you interact in the real life. That's what I said. Those games, basically, they emulate the type of relationship you've got with real people. Then we've got another category, what I call theme games. Now, basically, they look like massively social games. The difference is that, first of all, they look more similar to the game we know because usually there's a gaming objective. You have to go up in ranking. You have to improve your score. You can defeat other players and so on. You can also play, you don't need your friends to play those games. You can play just by yourself against other players. And they are designed against a strong theme. A few examples: Treasure Madness, you hunt for treasure. Mobster, you play the role of a gangster. Fashion War, it's a competition game in the world of fashion. Pony Valley, you have to raise horses and so on. You know, all those games, they have a very strong theme. Can be played by yourself, and they have like a competitive dimension. Third category, we all know it, MMOs. Now, what you probably already know is that most subscription-based MMO are turning to free-to-play. There's only one which is surviving, you know, I'm not going to even to give its name. What is amazing is that even super strong MMOs with super strong license, like Dungeons and Dragons or Lord of the Ring, they are turning to a free-to-play game. And I even think that in Korea, there's not a single MMO who is going with a subscription model, except obviously World of Warcraft. So MMO in free-to-play tend to attract a younger audience, essentially because it's free. So that means that anybody can play, including younger audience who don't have the money to buy retail games or just to buy a subscription. Two examples: MapleStory, RuneScape, Dungeons and Dragons Online. And lastly, last category, in my view again, action and strategy games. Now, there are not that many of those. I think the number is increasing for a simple reason, is that those games are much more complex to develop. They look like the games we buy in retail. For instance, Combat Arm, it's a shooter, it's a first-person shooter. Or League of Legends, looks a bit like a World of Warcraft, like Warcraft, it's a strategy game. Those games are much more costly to develop, much more costly to run because they are multiplayer and real-time multiplayer. However, those games attract gamers because they are much closer to what we're used to. So, now, let's talk about the benefits of this business model. Now, the first one is that initial investment is much lower than for a regular game. This is important. I've got those two figures. According to Nexon, who is the big South Korean company specialized in that, they said that they publish a game with only half of its content. For Playfish, it's even lower. For Playfish, they say we publish the game with just 20% of its final content. So obviously that means that you can start a game and start making money with it with a much lower threshold. Now, why is it that? First, technology are inexpensive. Most free-to-play games are not, super high-tech game engines.